Welcome to the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick. Today, no guest. Today, I'm going to run through my end of season awards. And look, I know there are a lot of my colleagues that have opted out of voting on the awards for different reasons. Totally understand it. I did this last year in an effort of being transparent about all of my end of season awards. And I think too that our votes are public. Like you can actually see what I voted for. So these are going to come out anyways. I might as well just make a show about it. This is not a fun exercise, by the way. I just want to be clear on that. It's not a fun exercise. Even with the financial incentives attached, even if you take that out, some of these Supermax extensions based on all NBA, even if you take that out of it, it's still not a fun exercise. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad for the voters. I think if you approach this in a pragmatic way, you're oftentimes left with very difficult decisions. And I would describe a number of these exercises as splitting hairs, particularly this season, where there's some maybe all NBA teams or some all defensive teams where I'm like, I feel pretty confident about this. And then there's other things where you can argue for one player over another player or one player for the, over the other player, and it's splitting hairs. So this is very difficult. Let's get right into it. I actually want to start with most improved player. And this is an award where, I've argued against this the last couple of years where you have an all-star, John Morant in one case, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in another case. You have all-stars who for much of the season are talked about being the most improved player. Oftentimes you do have all-stars like Ja or like Shai that take another jump. I think the most improved player, how I look at it, is not necessarily a star then becoming a superstar, right? And certainly certain years you can make that case. So Maxey has been far and away the leader in this sort of award for much of the season. Kobe White, of course, from the Chicago Bulls. It really came down to those two guys. I ultimately have Maxey as the most improved player, Kobe White as second, and then a number of guys I thought were worthy of the third spot. I have DiVincenzo from the New York Knicks in that third spot. Duncan Robinson and Jonathan Kuminga also gave them some consideration. Maxey, for me, look, this was a guy who increased his usage, increased his role. His free throw rate went up. His assist percentage went way up. His turnover percentage actually went down. You can certainly point to the shooting numbers, particularly from three, taking a drop relative to last season. And look, he played a lot of this season without Joel Embiid. And I think Joel Embiid, of course, that partnership, I lived through it, that two-man game, like it makes you a better player. And I think Tyrese Maxey is the most improved player, but I want to give a shout out, of course, to Kobe White, who I had second for this award. Kobe certainly improved a lot. You can point to his pull-up jump shooting, which took a huge leap this year just in terms of percentages relative to the rest of his career. His playmaking, outstanding. And, when this team was, really floundering early in the season, he helped right the ship. He helped give them stability. And he deserves a lot of credit. Ultimately, I had Maxey, Kobe White, DiVincenzo for most improved player. Sixth man. I know Malik Monk had an outstanding season. I've actually got him second in sixth man. Naz Reid was my sixth man of the year. And I gave a lot of consideration to Norman Powell, Bogdanovich from Atlanta, and TJ McConnell from the Indiana Pacers for the third spot. But ultimately, I went with Bobby Portis for the third spot. So for sixth man, I've got Naz Reid, Malik Monk in second, Bobby Portis. And I think Naz Reid off the bench, and whether he's had to start some games because of Cat's injury, just a phenomenal season for him. And with all this stuff, again, you could make an argument for Malik Monk. You could make an argument for Bobby Portis. I think you're factoring in a ton of different stuff for all these awards. Certainly the Minnesota Timberwolves having the season that they did, ultimately ending up in third place in the Western Conference. that gives a little bit of a boost to me for Naz Reid and his importance on that team. All right, defensive player of the year. This was one of the hardest ones to figure out. I'll be honest with you. Um, you know, Minnesota had the best defense in the league this season, and Rudy Gobert would be a deserving winner of this award. I want to acknowledge that, when he's off the floor, the team doesn't perform that much worse defensively. They have a number of candidates, and we'll talk about this in a second on all defense, but they have a number of candidates: Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, on the defensive end that have been really, really good. So they have a foundation with Rudy Gobert, and then they have just a perfect personnel mix around him. Kyle Anderson, again, a really smart, impactful defender. So this was hard because I think Victor Wembanyama has a legitimate case for Defensive Player of the Year, and I think Bam Adebayo has a legitimate case for Defensive Player of the Year. Ultimately, where I ended up, I have Rudy Gobert as the Defensive Player of the Year, Victor Wembanyama second in my list, and Bam Adebayo third on my list. And I'll give a lot of credit. I talked to Bam about this when I had their game last week against the Dallas Mavericks. Bam, for a lot of his career, has been a heavy switch defender in pick and roll. This year, Eric Spoelstra asked him to play more drop coverage. He did. They played less zone this year. He was asked to do a lot on that back line. I asked Bam, why did you guys make the switch? What did Spo tell you? Because Spo wants me near the basket. He wants me protecting the rim. And not only is he a really valuable switching defender, he's a really valuable rim protector. So I had him third. Again, I feel like I'm splitting hairs with all these guys. Ultimately, Minnesota having the best defense, beyond just the counting stats, Rudy's impact on field goal percentage around the rim, even field goal attempts around the rim, defensive rebounding, all of that stuff. Rudy Gobert, my Defensive Player of the Year. All defense, man, this was tough. So my first team all defense, again, this is positionless this year. Where I got Alex Caruso, Herb Jones, Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama, and Bam Adebayo. It was very hard to leave Derek White off my first team, but I have him second team along with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jared Allen, Jalen Suggs. And for my 10th spot, I felt like I really had to put someone from OKC on this list. They were number 4 defensively this year. Mark Daigneault, phenomenal job. And I really could have chose between Shea, Lou Dort, Chet Holmgren. Certainly Jalen Williams, also a really good defender. I went with Shea for my 10th spot on all defense. In terms of deflection, steals, blocks from the guard position, just really disruptive. Gave a lot of thought to Lou Dort as well, who is tasked, of course, with guarding all the big wing perimeter players, and spent a lot of time guarding all-stars this year. But I ultimately ended up with Shea in that 10th spot. I could have probably named 10 more guys for all defense. Just really tough this year. So that's 6-man, most improved, all defense, Defensive Player of the Year. Rookie of the Year, I know we had a lot of discourse around this at the beginning of the new year. My Rookie of the Year is Victor Wembanyama. Chet Holmgren is second. Brandon Miller is third. Again, Chet had an outstanding rookie year. Brandon Miller, particularly after LaMelo Ball went down, just really impressed me with his shot making and his ability to play both catch and shoot and off the dribble and pick and roll. But Vic had an historic Rookie of the Year. I think it completely offsets the team success portion. And even going back to Defensive Player of the Year, when Victor Wembanyama was not on the floor for the Spurs, they were the worst defense. And when he was on the floor, they were the equivalent of a top 5 defense in the NBA. He logged significantly less minutes than, let's say, Bam Adebayo. But overall, his on-court impact on both sides of the basketball, and there's a million different one of these stats, but the first player ever to have X amount of blocks and 3-pointers in a season. The first player since Shaq's MVP year to average 20, 10, 3, and 3. He was the Rookie of the Year this year. And he, in some ways, probably exceeded the amount of hype that he had going back to last year, at the end of last year, leading up to the draft, and of course the draft, summer league, all that stuff, he exceeded all of it. And credit to him, a credit to the Spurs. Victor Wembanyama is my rookie of the year. All rookie, first team, first four spots were I was pretty confident with. Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren, Brandon Miller, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. Fifth spot, I went back and forth on. Ultimately, it landed on Brandon Pajimski, kind of a jack of all trades player, does a number of things well, shoots the three really well off the dribble. You know, the shot efficiency, like most rookies, wasn't great, but I just thought overall his impact on that team, particularly when he moved into the starting lineup, his rebounding, his toughness. I believe he led the NBA in charges this season. So I give the fifth spot to Brandon Pajimski from the Golden State Warriors. My second team all rookie, Cason Wallace, both the Thompsons, Amen Thompson from Houston, Ausar Thompson from Detroit, Derek Lively from the Dallas Mavericks, and the 10th spot, again, splitting hairs here for this one, Keontae George. I know the shot efficiency wasn't great, but playing point guard in the NBA as a rookie is a really tough thing. I had him ahead of Scoot Henderson in terms of that position for what he did this year with the Utah Jazz. So I've got Keontae George in my 10th spot for all rookie. Woo! All right, coach of the year. So many good coaches. I whittled it down to 5 guys that I really was felt strongly about for coach of the year. Mark Daigneault from OKC, Chris Finch from Minnesota, Tom Thibodeau from the New York Knicks, Jamal Mosley from the Orlando Magic, and Joe Mazzulla from the Boston Celtics. Ultimately, I have Mark Daigneault as the coach of the year. OKC, look, we talked about expectations earlier in the year. We talked about it with Jalen on the podcast. We talked about it with the Dunker Spot guys on this show, the Old Man of the Three Things. And again, a lot of this coach of the year stuff is relative to expectations. And that's why I have to give Mark Daigneault the coach of the year. Number 3 offense this year, number 4 defense, number 2 net rating to the Boston Celtics, number 1 seed in the Western Conference, a loaded conference. Mark Daigneault is my coach of the year. Second, I had Joe Mazzulla. I'm not gonna just not give credit to Joe Mazzulla for having a loaded roster and a roster full of really good basketball players. And the reason is because I've been around the league enough to know that oftentimes a coach can get in the way of that and teams can struggle. And I thought Joe Mazzulla getting his guys to buy in on sacrifice across the board, getting his guys to buy in on roles, getting his guys to approach the regular season with a level of seriousness worthy of a champion. Joe Mazzulla, outstanding coaching job. Second for me. And then again, for that third spot, kind of splitting hairs. Ultimately, I went with Chris Finch, number 1 defense in the league. We spoke with him on the Old Man of the Three last summer about the challenges of playing 2 bigs, the challenges of figuring out spacing. And look, their offense at times was clunky, but when you build the number 1 defense and you win 56 games and you get the 3 seed in the West, that deserves some strong consideration for coach of the year. Jamal Mosley, of course, Orlando Magic, number 3 defense. I have to give him a lot of credit. This was a team that didn't have a ton of expectations coming into the year, end up with the 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. Their team has an identity, man. It's a beautiful thing. Really excited to see him first time as a head coach in the playoffs. And then, of course, Tibbs, I got to give a ton of credit for with all the injuries, midseason trades, and having to play guys 40-some minutes a game because of injuries and rotations. Ended up with the 2nd seed in the East. Come on, man. Tibbs had a great coaching year. Those are my 5, top 5 coaches this year. And in terms of the job they did. And ultimately, I went with Mark Daigneault for coach of the year. All right. Clutch player. Man, this was tough. I whittled it down to 4 guys for this award. DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Steph. Ultimately, I went with Steph. Even though they had a 23-20 record, he's got the most clutch time points. He's shooting 50% from the field and 46% from three in clutch time, more threes than anyone else in clutch time. Just a phenomenal clutch time performer, as always, from Steph Curry, and even better this year. For the second, third spot, look, Shea and Jokic are the only two players in the NBA to score more than 100 points in clutch time and shoot over 55% from the field. Jokic was 23-13 in clutch time. Shea was 23-11. I'm going to give the slight nod to Shea for the second spot. Nikola Jokic in that third spot. And DeMar, who also had an outstanding season in the clutch. Bulls 24-16, 40 clutch games that he played in, and of course operated at an all-time level. I feel like for all these awards, there's so many worthy candidates. It's really hard to eliminate a guy off the official ballot. But DeMar, for me, ended up being the fourth place guy. All right, now the fun part: MVP and All NBA. God, this sucks. Oh, man. I want to explain one thing. Because I really, really struggled with one particular aspect of this part of the vote, and that is first team All NBA and MVP. And I was thinking about how I weight all of these, and some of these I probably maybe in terms of a scale and balance. Some of these awards I maybe weight individual performance slightly higher. All NBA, certainly that gets weighted at, let's say, 55 to 60% versus team success, which gets weighted at 40 to 45%. MVP, right? The scales tip a little bit on that. It's probably 60% team performance, 40% individual performance. I want to be consistent on this, and unfortunately, I have one discrepancy between my top 5 MVP votes and my first team All NBA. And I apologize for that. And I went back and forth. I wanted to be consistent, but how I view the definition of MVP and how I view the definition of first team All NBA and all the All NBA teams is a little different. And I wish I could have been down the board, same 5 guys in both votes, but unfortunately I didn't land there. So MVP for me, again, it came down to 3 guys. It came down to Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Ultimately, I gave, by the slightest of margins, I gave my vote to Nikola Jokic for MVP, Luka Doncic in second, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in third. I had Jason Tatum fourth in MVP and Jalen Brunson fifth in MVP. Giannis was the other guy I gave consideration to, just outside the top 5. And again, I think particularly with Shai, Jokic, and Luka, similar to last year where I had a vote, there's 3 guys that are deserving MVPs. In terms of the why, again, I'm factoring in a ton of stuff. I think Jokic was the best basketball player in the NBA this season. I think Luka was the second best basketball player in the NBA this season. You certainly have to factor in the amount of injuries that the Dallas Mavericks have, the trades midseason, trying to integrate a rookie center, and I get all of that. And it's probably why I weighed him slightly ahead of Shai, who led by on-court play the second youngest team in the NBA to the first place in the Western Conference. Shai's deserving, Luka's deserving, Jokic is deserving. I think Denver ended up, approaching this regular season, particularly after the All-Star break, with a level of seriousness and professionalism, and he was the driving force behind that. 57 wins for them, tied with OKC for the best record in the Western Conference. Of course, OKC gets the head-to-head nod tiebreaker. But yeah, that's it. Jokic, Luka, Shai. In terms of the 4th-5 spot, Tatum. Again, I'm not going to, because they had a loaded team similar to Joe Mazzulla, I'm not going to just totally discredit him for an award because of their top-end depth and how they played this year. Tatum deserves strong consideration for MVP. And Jalen Brunson and Giannis, I'm being serious. The fact that Jalen Brunson took the Knicks to the second seed was like the tipping point for me. Giannis had an incredible individual season. Again, relative to expectations, I believe the Knicks outperformed those, particularly once Julius Randle was hurt. And the Milwaukee Bucks probably underperformed relative to expectations. All right, let's get to the first team. This is where I have a discrepancy. Again, I'm weighing individual slightly ahead of team. Giannis, to me, 30, 10, and 5 on over 60% shooting. Nobody's ever done that in NBA history. Giannis gets a nod on first team. Of course, Luka, Shea, Jason Tatum, first team All-NBA for me. Second team, I had 25 guys written down for All-NBA, and I probably could have added 5 more. This was really hard. So Jalen Brunson, second team All-NBA. Anthony Edwards, second team All-NBA. Kevin Durant, second team All-NBA. Kawhi Leonard, second team All-NBA. I had a lot of back and forth internally for that 5th spot on second team All-NBA. Ultimately, I went with the guy that to me was like the driving force of his team. Led the NBA in double-doubles, had an incredible, I think it was 61-game streak. That's Domantas Sabonis for second team All-NBA. Third team, Tyrese Halliburton, Jaylen Brown, Steph Curry. I really struggled with whether or not to add 2 Lakers to this. Ultimately, I went with LeBron James for third team, and then it came down to Anthony Davis or Victor Wembanyama for me for the final spot. And man, I know that the Lakers are in the play-in. I can't deny that Anthony Davis had an outstanding individual season. The defensive numbers for the Lakers as a team are not great. They've been basically right around league average all year. But his impact defensively, particularly protecting the paint at the rim, all of the metrics say he's been a top 10 defender at that position. You factor in that with 25 and 12, a boost in assists this year. Anthony Davis gets the final spot on my third team All-NBA. I'm sure you guys will have a lot to say about this, and that's okay. Again, I welcome the discourse around this. And Dallas Mavericks fans, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I couldn't carry the torch for you. But Nikola Jokic is my MVP this year.